Welcome to the program. My name is Marty Shenkman. I'm going to introduce you to two special guests who are joining us from Abu Dhabi, right?
No, we are from Dubai. Dubai,
Dubai.
same country.
Dubai, the chocolate. I got to get some of that chocolate.
The
And
kunafa chocolate.
it's like midnight there, maybe later, I don't know. So forgive them if they're looking a little slow. This is a really fascinating program. And let me just start by saying I do a lot of very typical webinars, the new 237th reduction on DNI distributions for trust. We do that. But I also think we have such a fascinating profession where we deal with every aspect of humanity from religion to health issues to addiction issues. We cover the gamut. And when I meet people like you're going to meet in a minute that are just really interesting, I love to explore different areas because that really helps inform all of us about the breadth and depth and in this case, the future of the profession. And I may be wrong, but I think these two guys are really at the forefront of where estate planning is going very quickly. We've done some programs on AI. We're going to do more programs on AI, but this is going to talk about the blockchain and estate distributions, and we're going to explore ad hoc, just off the cuff because I want to get that natural discussion, and I'm still trying to understand everything. So I hope you pay attention and you stick with us because I really think not only will this be fascinating, but I'm really convinced this is where estate planning will is heading. So Tom Tietz is my partner. You know him. Deepak Ishan, introduce
Hi.
yourselves and tell them who you are and just mention your company, but not too long. We don't want a sales pitch, but just tell everybody who you are and what you're working on.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. My name is Deepak, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Blockwell. And hi, I'm Ishan Shukla. I'm the co-founder and head of strategy of Blockwell
And a lawyer.
and a lawyer. Where this story starts is that the previous year in 2025, my grandfather died without a will, and that led to a family conflict, a conflict so grave that it it broke apart two brothers, very loving brothers, and till date that strain is still there because I want to celebrate festivals with my kin, but I'm a little hesitant of doing so because something is off. Because someone, my grandfather, was not able to pay heed to something very important in our lives, that's succession planning. And when I discussed this thing with Deepak, he he gave me his version of the story where his family disputes land three generations back. So we thought about this and we saw a huge problem which is plagued by the entire world. And that is where we came together and we built something which we'll be talking about.
And what we're going to talk about in this session, and we're going to have a follow-up session where we have a more formal PowerPoint and they're going to explain conceptually how more of this works. But this just got so interesting when Tom and I were talking with Deepak and Ishan that I just said, let's just have a discussion and start with that as part one. And what I wanted to do is try to use a practical issue that estate planners see and deal with and start to explore how their concepts and using the blockchain may be able to solve some practical problems. So even if you don't feel comfortable diving in and doing everything that they have to offer, the idea of how it can be applied in perhaps a narrow application may itself be very, very beneficial and useful for clients. All right, so explain to somebody who doesn't know and probably has tried to avoid it, what is the blockchain and how does it work so that we can get unique records that cannot be tampered with?
Yes, Martin, I think that's a brilliant question. And a lot
But
of
by the way,
people
you got to
outside.
call me Marty because the only person in my life that ever called me Martin was my mother, And anytime she said my name, I knew I was in trouble. So Marty's fine, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. Marty, that's a question that I used to get a lot because I am from the tech background and a lot of my friends are not from tech. And they used to ask me that what is blockchain? Because according to them, blockchain means cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency means Bitcoin. I mean, that's the like 99% of the people thinks about blockchain. But blockchain is actually the technology behind cryptocurrency or the Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I would say, is just one use case of blockchain, but the technology has multiple use cases. So, in simple terms, blockchain is actually a cryptographic proof. That means, in an analogy, you have written something in stone and you can't change it, and that is being proved mathematically because the blocks that are creating on the blockchain, even if you tamper with one, the entire chain becomes inconsistent. And this is so decentralized that not one person can change it because it's in decentralized nature. A lot of people have the same ledger, so making a change by one person is impossible. So that's how blockchain becomes immutable. Whatever gets recorded in one block remains there forever.
So is it conceptually that, let's say there's 100 different users that have the blockchain sitting
Yeah.
on supercomputers somewhere. And if you tinker with one, the other 99 aren't going to match. Somebody knows something's wrong.
Yes, and they will correct it.
And how do you legitimately add something to or change something legitimately in the blockchain so it replicates across the whole platform?
So that's where the computation comes in. That those servers that are running across the world, they do the computation. It's a math that is being done. So it's a mathematical problem that each one of them is solving, and the data that is coming into the transactions that are coming into that block basically get solved, and that mathematical problem gets solved, and then a block is getting created. And that block, the one that is created, it is linked to the previous block. So any change in the previous block will invalidate the current block as well. So that's how the linkages between the blocks is created, and any change in one of the previous blocks it will invalidate all the blocks that are uh, ahead of it. So I mean, that's how the entire blockchain system works.
So
One
I
of
want to try two different
go,
analogies that I think may help a little bit here. The first is to consider the blockchain like a giant ledger, and it's a constant history since the very beginning of all of these assets that are, or whatever it is that's listed on the blockchain. And anytime something is changed on the ledger at the bottom, it is public. Everybody can compute it as part of the blockchain, and it's validated across all the various people that have access to this magical ledger that is being updated in real time. And if there are 1,000 copies of the ledger across the world, and one of those 1,000 is not consistent with the other 999, that's how you know there's an issue, and that will be corrected to what the other 999 include. The other analogy I have is to consider it kind of like in the United States, we have title for real property, and you record the deed with the county in which that real property is located, and they keep a copy of that, which is kind of like the proof of the blockchain for the next person that's going to come and deal with the title of that particular piece of property that we're talking about. So if you want to liken, and you're nodding your head, so I assume I'm kind of getting it right here. If you want to think of the blockchain, think of it as almost like digital deed transfer on a more decentralized viewpoint. So we know with deeds, if the county makes a mistake, it's something you have to deal with, and that's why we have title insurance in the United States. But by being decentralized, we're reducing the errors by making it a group project and mathematical point.
Let me just
Yes.
expand.
And
Let me just say one thing about what Tom just said, and we're not going to cover it today because it's not our topic. But the concept of using the blockchain to record real estate transfers so that nobody can tinker with it, change it illegally, inappropriately, that's going to probably be the future of real estate recording. And maybe people won't need title insurance because there won't be an issue on the property. Now, or not to the same extent. There's advertisements in the US pretty frequently on television where they sell some type of home lock insurance. And I don't mean if that's the name, and I'm not trying to use the name of the company, but the idea meaning that they somehow monitor the deed recording stream for your home. So if somebody tries to fraudulently record a deed transferring your home to them and then, mortgage money out on your equity, they can alert you or address it somehow. The blockchain may solve that. So there's lots of fascinating applications. We're not going to delve into the real estate because I want to focus on some estate planning applications. Ishan, you had a comment, and then we'll go through some of the points that we had talked about.
Yeah. So, you know what? Tom has rightly figured it out. I'll just say that when a title deed is put with some authority, there is just one hand holding it. Blockchain is the 1 million hands holding the same title deed. One man can be wrong. One man can say this is false. But when the 900, I mean, the rest of the world is saying that this is correct, that is what the power of decentralization comes in. It's a process of validating the truth with the highest number, and it doesn't really work like a democracy. It works like an autocracy, which is decentralized in nature.
Think about the idea that somebody, especially now using AI, is going to fraudulently create a new will or a new legal document and what that could do to an estate. But if key information is posted to the blockchain where you have a million replications of it, tinkering, changing it fraudulently, it's not just
Yes.
here's my new will. No, 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 no. It's out there with a million replications. It doesn't work. Think about the power of how this may become a standard for securing a client's wishes. And especially with, and I don't know if this is true where you live or in your culture, but in America, the definition of what a family is, the typical family is changed dramatically. It's very common to have second, third, and fourth marriages and adopted children and out of wedlock children. It becomes complex. Having the assurance that there is no doubt that this was the will, not something else, is huge. Think about an elderly client where a home health aide is going to take the client to an attorney to do a fraudulent will, leaving the home health aide the money. Sadly happens frequently. Elder financial abuse. It's epidemic. But if the will that the client did when they were competent is posted on the blockchain and the new will isn't, think of the credibility that's given to that, because now a million plus replications of the real will are there versus one unknown lawyer working out of their basement did a new will. So
And
Absolutely.
think if that individual has multiple iterations of their will on the blockchain. It shows that they were doing this consistently, and now this new will that this attorney in the basement made isn't there. It shows that there was something different that happened. Why is it different? It helps with challenging the new will that may not be the true wishes of that client.
so we're going to get into
Absolutely.
some what I think are practical examples
Yes.
and talk about how estate planners can use some of these practical examples perhaps in their practice And we're going to do that so that you can relate to it better. And then in part 2 of this, we're going to have a follow-up webinar with PowerPoint. It's going to be a more traditional webinar. We're going to go through a series of slides that Deepak and Nishan have created and explain in more detail how this works. There may be a little repetition, but the idea was we wanted to first really try to build some interest in these ideas, that there is a practical, not so distant future for some of this, and then we'll walk you through the basics. So I hope that by breaking it into 2 parts, we'll get you interested and get some of the basic concepts, and then we'll teach it to you again in more methodical and sequential manner in part 2. I got to ask a dumb question. Forgive me, and if it's a dumb question. So let's take the example we talked about. An older person has a will, they're leaving their assets to their kids, and they decide that that's their will and they sign it, everything's good. But then some predator, home health aide, tries to take them to a new attorney to get a new will done. Theoretically, conceptually, I could post their will to the blockchain so we know it's out there and no one can question it. But explain to me, I want to have my will available in a way that nobody can question it, but I don't want the whole world to see my will. I'm fine if everybody sees Martin Shenkman's will is there, but I don't want them to see that I left Deepak, half my money instead of my kids. And that's because he's going to get me all this Dubai chocolate.
Yes. So basically, you want to have privacy by design, but still wants to have it immutable and people to prove that it's not tampered with, right?
Yes.
And that's, I mean, we have done that by using what we call as hashing. So hashing is a technical term where it's kind of a fingerprint of a document. So using an algorithm, you hash the document, and that document gives you a fingerprint of that document. It's an alphanumeric string of almost 64 characters, right? What it does is that if you change even a comma or a full stop in that document, the fingerprint changes. And we are storing the fingerprint on the blockchain, not the contents of the will on the blockchain. So that even an independent expert using the same algorithm tries to hash the document again, they will get the same hash if the document is not tampered with. But if the document is tampered, anything changes, the fingerprint of that document will change and people will know that it has been tampered.
I hope everyone listening to this is now excited. You got to be excited. This is amazing. Okay, go on.
And what really plagues the will as we know it are 4 things. A will is prone to being lost. It is prone to being tampered. It is prone to being destroyed. And in worst cases, it is prone to be simply, burnt, like as if it never existed. I have seen this with my own eyes, where a family where of an elder person, he was having 2 sons and a daughter. The 2 sons did not want to alienate anything to the daughter, and they simply tore off the will
and created a fraudulent one.
So if such is, I mean, myself and Deepak, we believe that will is a 19th century instrument which is not really able to cater to modern day 21st century realities, because there has been a huge transition in the way modern wealth has evolved. Gone are those days where wealth simply meant land, gold, and a certain piece of house, some bricks and mortar. Now your wealth is diversified into various asset classes, not only in physical assets, but also financial assets like intellectual property, bank accounts, stock markets, mutual funds, retirement plans. More so in the last 10 years, cryptocurrencies, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and with the advent of real-world asset tokenization happening all across the globe, this is where most of the HNI portfolios are shifting towards. As far as our research goes, 15% of HNIs have crypto in their portfolio, a substantial part of it. So when this is the evolution of asset class, it cannot be addressed to by a 19th century document.
Not to correct you, but I think if you search the history of wills, you find it goes back thousands of years. It's even older. And conceptually, you're 100% right. And that's why I introduced this by saying I think this is the future of estate planning. And I don't mean 100 years from now. It's going to happen with AI and technology and the blockchain. Everything is going to continue to change at an incredibly rapid pace. Tom, you're good at this, much better than me. Explain and again what was just discussed, because I think it's really important for people to understand the hash or the fingerprint of a document. So the
Right.
will isn't going to, you're not going to have to see that I disinherited one of my kids and left the other two kids and my girlfriend my wealth, but you'll get a fingerprint to know if my real wishes were tampered with.
So I actually had a light bulb go off while Deepak and Ishan were talking. So I need to ask you two a quick question, and then I'm going to talk about where my thoughts were going. This hash or fingerprint that we're talking about here, is this on an individual document like the will that you upload to the blockchain, or is it on like a general folder where documents for this particular person can be housed? So if I have a folder with a suite of documents in it, can that have its own fingerprint that's put on the blockchain to prove that each of the documents in that folder have not been tampered with?
So the hash of the document is created for each and every document. So for
Okay.
example, a will is a PDF document, right? And for that PDF document, using an algorithm, there are multiple algorithms. SHA 256 is one of the most used one, right? And using that algorithm, basically you hash the document and it creates the alphanumeric string, and that string is actually the fingerprint of that document. So if there are
Okay.
multiple documents, you will get multiple hashes or multiple fingerprints of multiple documents. But each
So
document will have only one fingerprint.
So let me
Unique to
talk
it.
in generally to kind of expand on the fingerprint point for something that many practitioners have probably started using at this point, which is electronic signature. Whether it's through a system like DocuSign, Adobe, there's other systems out there that can do this. When a document is fully electronically signed, it will get a certificate number or a certification number that you can then go to that system and confirm this is what the document looked like when it was signed. So if somebody tries to leaf a page into that electronic document, going back and double checking what the system it was signed through will help validate it. And what Deepak and Ishan are doing with the blockchain here is a similar concept. But I want to expand this just beyond wills at this point, because in America, we have many different documents that can control how assets are going to go. If you have an entity, an LLC, the operating agreement for that entity will control how that entity will be governed. If you have multiple partners, if you put that operating agreement on the blockchain with its own particular hash, if there is a disagreement between the members of that LLC, you can prove what the true operating agreement that everybody agreed to and signed was. If you have documentation, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but a letter of instruction where the
Beneficiary
client is,
designations.
or beneficiary designations, transfer on death account statements, or life insurance beneficiary designations. You can put more than just the will for this client up on the blockchain. And then as changes happen, you're building a history of those changes. And as the change is happening, there may be a logical reason for it. The client got divorced and removed their ex-spouse from the beneficiary designation on their life insurance policy because the person didn't want to be on it anymore. And that change on the blockchain is recorded and it's shown. It's easier to build a case and understand elder financial abuse if there is an easy history that can be followed. And as Deepak and Ishan talked about, Things can get burned. Paper can be lost. Maybe it's not even malicious. Maybe it's the fact that there is a fire in your home and it's lost, or a sprinkler goes off in the storage system, the warehouse where it's located. So by having this additional backup of the documents and the history of that document, you're creating greater chance that that history and what everybody agreed to is not lost.
Let me make a couple of comments from two very different perspectives. There was a case, there have been cases where photocopies of wills, it's not uncommon. You go to court and you present the witnesses and you demonstrate that this photocopy was the copy of the original will, and the original will was lost, it wasn't revoked, and you have a court proceeding to recognize that copy. If look at all the natural disasters, it's not just, it's everywhere in the world. The rates of natural disasters is just burgeoning, and it's certainly worrisome. If there's a flood, a tornado, or hurricane, whether it's in a lawyer's office or the client's office, whether it's in a heavy steel and concrete reinforced file cabinet, that's not going to withstand hurricanes and tornadoes and everything else. If that same document were posted to the blockchain, and I haven't seen any law on this in the US, but I would think that if you can go through and prove the history of what Ishan and Deepak have discussed, why should this conceptually be different than bringing a photocopy of a originally signed will and saying to the court, this was the real will, it wasn't revoked, here are the witnesses that saw them do it, it's been irretrievably lost, please recognize and admit this photocopy of a will. I would actually think, based on what Deepak and Ishan are explaining, that it should be easier to convince a court that this blockchain hash that proves what the will was that was deposited there, if that's the right term, or recorded there, that's replicated all over the planet, is the real will. If you could bring in a photocopy that a lawyer found in their file cabinet, why can't you bring this in? And I think if one case this happens, and that's how you prove this and get this done, have somebody intentionally post their will, destroy the original, let them die, bring a case. And once we have law on this, that the floodgate should open, and this should be a step that's often considered. The flip side of that, I remember during COVID, I worked in a big thank you and shout out to the probably dozens of attorneys around the country who helped.
Yes.
I did an article, I think, Tom, you worked on it, and Jonathan Blattmacher worked on it, but we had dozens of people writing about their states. We did an article on how to sign a will remotely or electronically during COVID. And there were a lot of states that created temporary legislation to permit electronic will signing because I don't know if it's the profession, the legislators, but there's been a lot of resistance to electronic will signing. So on one hand, I don't conceptually see why what they're describing is not better than a photocopy of a will, and there's law to admit that. That would be a fascinating law journal article if it hasn't been done yet, and I bet it hasn't, versus the resistance to even having a remote notarization. So there's a lot of resistance, but there also may be some precedent. But what is being discussed here can give an incredible level of certainty to the existence of something. And that, especially with natural disasters, with family diversification, if that's a nice way of describing how family units have evolved, what a great backup. Now, lawyers may not want to do this routinely, but if they have someone where they're worried about elder abuse or someone taking advantage, or there's a very complex, unusual family situation, if you don't have to have the actual legal document be publicly visible, but just the hash, call it the fingerprint of that document, what an incredible way to backstop what your client did.
Absolutely.
And so just to bring us back to law school really quickly, everything that Marty's talking about is
I don't
called
want
the
to go back
facts.
to law school. I don't want to go back.
It's called a facts and circumstances test. And this is a
Yes.
great bolster to the facts and circumstances for this particular client.
So let's change gears and go through some what I hope are practical examples. But I think what we just discussed is actually a fascinating practical example. And let me ask you a question that just popped into my head. Deepak Isham, I'm going to let Tom describe it, but then I really would like you to comment. So we create, and lots of law firms do it. I bet every accounting firm does it, and probably every financial planning firm or lots of them do it. We create, and I'll mention the product we use. Maybe you've heard of it. It's not SharePoint, it's ShareFile,
ShareFile.
which is now owned by
ShareFile.
another company whose name I forgot. They got bought out. But we create a ShareFile portal. It's like we call it an electronic safe deposit box for every client, and they can upload documents for us to see so it's secure. But in each client's ShareFile portal, we have a repository, an electronic repository of all their documents. Now, it seems to me that what the blockchain can do, we have confidentiality because the client alone can set the password to get to their documents. So if they don't give somebody the password, that somebody can't get in. But what you're suggesting seems even better in a sense, that it's now publicly seen all over, so it can't be tinkered with, can't be tampered, can't be fraudulently changed. Only the hash or fingerprint, I think was one of the words you used, is visible. But then the client can give, just like they're doing with our ShareFile or any accountant or wealth advisor or law firm's portal, they can give, and I may use the wrong word, so don't correct me. The private key, if that's the right term, in order to get access to the underlying document. Why is that any different? It even seems more secure than what we and other law firms and accounting firms and wealth advisory firms are already doing.
That's my favorite topic, Marty. Let me explain you that.
No offense,
So
but you must be a bigger nerd than me then. That's your favorite topic. I don't know. I was
yeah,
about to invite
so
you over for July 4th, but if that's your favorite topic, I don't know that I'm going to invite you to my July 4th barbecue.
I'll be there. So, according to the NIST organization of US, which provide the guidance of what should be the security of the digital authentication and cyber security, according to them, there are 4 levels of authentications. The level 1 is the password, which is the weakest and the most compromised one in the entire world. It is the most sought after by the cyber attackers. They fish the password, they guess the password, they crack the password. Second level is two-factor authentication, but what we have seen is that two-factor authentication is also can be phished. Your sim can be swapped, right? So even two-factor authentication is not
When
good.
just for people that don't follow that, when you say SIM, it's like the SIM card in your phone where you get the
SIM card
text.
in your phone, yes,
So
it
that
can
can
be,
be
that can be phished, that can be phished easily,
okay.
Or
Fished,
it can be
PH.
cloned as well. Yeah.
Oh wow.
yes, yeah, yes,
Okay. I just want to
yes,
make sure that
they
everyone
do
understands what you're saying. Okay.
conference call and the OTP comes on the call and they also listen to it.
Right. Wow.
Great.
Yeah,
Now I'm feeling like
that
this is
happens.
an ethics because I'm starting to sweat a little bit.
So the third one is called copyable passkeys. That's a new concept, and a non-profit organization, FIDO2 and WebAuthn protocols have come out for that, and a lot of banks are adopting it as of now. And the copyable passkeys can be created in a phone, right? It has a dedicated chip for that in your phone, both Apple as well as Android.
And that actually, in simpler terms, like so that the viewers can understand this, A copyable passkey can be formed by way of your face ID, your fingerprint on your phone, or maybe the biometrics, the iris of your eye. So all these things are used to create a passkey. Even the pattern that you draw on your phone, that can also be a passkey.
Yeah. So that's the
So
level
it's like
3.
we're going more towards the James Bond style, where you need to lean over and have it scan your eye in order to get access to it.
Yes.
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 And the fourth one, which is used even by the top companies like Meta, Google, right? Uh, and the US federal agencies like FBI and CIA, is called YubiKey. And you should be happy about it that there is only one company that's in US that makes it, Yubico. And it is something like this. So this is a hardware key, and it's a hardware pass key, and it's non-copyable, and that's the most secure way of authentication.
Wow. All right. Should we try a practical topic and try to see how all this applies?
Of
Sounds
course.
good to me.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the simple concepts that we were speaking about in planning this discussion is something that comes up for every estate practically. Everyone's got tangible property, furniture, artwork, jewelry, collectibles. So one approach is you list the tangibles if they're very valuable or unique, or you're concerned that the heirs, kids or otherwise, may fight about it, you list it in the will. One of the first probates I handled in my practice 40 years ago when I got started. Yeah, I know I am that old. One of the first wills that I handled, the woman had no immediate family, no spouse or children, and she left things to nieces and nephews. And I remember specifically she had a bequest of a diamond brooch to a particular niece. And it was in the will. I didn't write the will. I was just helping with the probate. When she passed away, we immediately had the apartment secured, lock changed, and an independent company come in and do a detailed inventory where they listed every single item in the apartment. There was no diamond brooch. So the will left the diamond brooch to a niece. There was no diamond brooch to be found. We don't know if it got flushed down the toilet, thrown out by accident, stolen. Maybe she gave it to that very niece and the niece was just, trying to create trouble to get more money. We never could figure it out. So one of the approaches that some people will use is not to list tangible property in a will, especially if it changes because they make gifts and everything else and they don't want to come back and formally re-sign a will. So one of the approaches is to say, okay, under some state laws, New Jersey, yes, I think New York, no, I don't know other jurisdictions, but you can list in the will, state in the will that I have a list of tangible property and it's incorporated by reference. Some states recognize that, some don't. But if you do that, the questions become, how do we know which list? What if somebody tampered with the list? What if somebody tore the list up? Using the example one of you gave where, the two brothers didn't want the sister to get anything, so they tore up the will. Oh, I don't want my cousin getting all the jewelry. I tear up the list and now we can fight about it and I'll get more. But it sounds to me like, let's say lawyers are not ready yet in the US to put a will on the blockchain. But I'm fascinated, and we got to talk more about this. And we'll do a part 2. We may have to do a part 3. But what about taking that list and putting it on the blockchain? I now have a hash or a fingerprint, as you called it. And that way, the world doesn't see all the jewelry or artwork that I have. They just know this string of numbers. I think you called it an algorithm. And they know if it's tinkered with because it's all over. But now, if I die, there's no question what that list is. Can you explain, if that makes sense, how it would work, what would be done?
Sure. So, Marty, I mean, the biggest problem in succession is the asset discovery nightmare. the people are not having three relevant information to go to the asset and to retrieve the asset. Number one is they do not know whether the asset exists. Number two is they do not know if it exists, where is it located. And number three is even if they know the location, they do not know how to access it, be it in the physical world or more so and more difficultly in the digital world.
Right.
Existence, location, asset. If all these questions are answered in one list that puts one column, the the very heirloom or the list of properties that a person owns. The second column is whether where to locate these things, and the third column where if you locate this, how do you get to them. So if this kind of a list is secured by blockchain, what it does is two things. Number one, it helps in provenance. It is a proof that these things existed in that space and time. And second, that it recreates an immutable record of evidence, which, according to the US laws, federal rules of evidence, I'm specifically citing 902 clause 13 and 14. Under that provision, this is treated as an electronic evidence. So this is how one must approach to pass on the movable properties in a sort of structured fashion. And another problem which we have witnessed is that a will is becoming a static document. It is a 1 in 5 years kind of a document, and your movable property, it changes hands. You acquire new property, you discard the older one. So it is very cumbersome and difficult to regularly keep updating a will, going to the notary, getting it all registered, attested, witnessed. Better to have a repository which creates versions of it. List 1 dated 2025 December 17, list 2 dated 2026 January 16. Every month, if you are acquiring something new, you can have a version thing, and all those versions are getting documented and recorded on the blockchain. What the blockchain essentially does for you is it creates it proves the identity of the person who has signed it. It proves the timing of that person, as to that this document is as it stands on this date, because there is a timestamp. And number three is that it ensures that it cannot be tampered.
So let's just explore a little further the idea of a list of personal property, because if you have a list, whether the lawyer chooses under state law to incorporate by reference or just have a list that is non-binding, but the executor is going to follow it. In either event, if that list is immutable, can't be tinkered with, public record, the fingerprint, not the details. And I'd love the concept of the history. So if I change it next year, you can look back and see what was there and how it changed. There's nothing for the heirs to fight about. How would
Yes.
can you describe just practically? So let's say I got a list of personal property, my fancy water bottle I'm going to leave to my oldest son. How do I get that list on the blockchain? And how would I tell them that list is there? Who do I give what information to? Do I give my oldest son the pass key for the list that says the
Yes.
water bottle?
So,
Explain in some detail,
so
because I think it'll help people make this real if they understand what to
absolutely,
do.
absolutely. So remember we talked about that. First is the inventorization of the assets. Second is creating a digiwish, right? The proof of intent for those assets to be distributed to the beneficiaries.
And that
Now the
that would be
third part.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but in this conversation, that would be the list of personal property and who I want it to go to.
Correct.
And you
Correct.
called
So
that, I
that
think, a
list of
DigiWish.
yes, DigiWish.
Okay.
So that list of properties that you have created should be passed on to the beneficiaries. So and the same list should go to each and every beneficiary. Then only it makes sense.
But that would
So
happen only when I die,
yes, and
if that's what I
that
want.
will so absolutely, absolutely, and that can be done. That once the event is triggered, and then there can be three things that can happen with a person. I mean, there can be a death, there can be an incapacitation, or a person gone missing. Right? On these three occasions, this list should go to each and every beneficiary that is out there.
And
And how
how
does
do you
functions?
find that one of those three events has happened? Who causes the trigger that releases this fingerprint so the document can be accessed?
So in our system, we have given that role to an executor. An executor can be a dear friend, a lawyer,
Your spouse, your brother.
so anyone who you trust, and they don't have visibility to this list. This list only goes to the beneficiaries, and the person who's the executor can only trigger the events, but he will never see that list.
So I don't know if I would use the term executor, because that has in the US system a specific connotation of somebody who's charged, named in the will, and charged with administering the estate. This is almost like a person that will trigger the events that the client chose. So I may choose not to give the information to the beneficiaries, and this is a question, even though it sounds like a statement. I might choose that Tom is going to be my trigger person. He'll know if I'm dead because I won't answer his phone calls. Tom Tom will trigger that by sending a death certificate. But I want my list, my personal tangible property list, to go only to the executor because I don't want it to be binding. Can that be done?
Yes, yes, that can be done. So it depends upon the asset owner what he wants to do, right? If he wants to
Perfect.
send this to Ben, yeah.
Perfect. I want to just reframe this again because this is really fascinating. I can give an independent person, it could be my friend, it could be my partner, Tom. He'll know if I'm dead or disabled. And I've already told him when I start to lose my marbles, he's got to make me quit. But but when you have that person that holds the trigger, exercises the trigger, I might just have the list only go to the executor because I may feel, listen, some of the property may not be there. I don't want the kids to get the list and start fighting. I'm only giving it to the executor. On the other hand, depending on the family dynamics, I may want every beneficiary, kid or otherwise, to be notified of what I've left them. Because if I only tell the executor in some cases, how do I know it's going to be carried out? So look at what this, if I'm understanding this correctly, I got a public facing document. So my list cannot be changed by anybody. I decide who's going to make that trigger happen. And when the trigger happens, and this could be different for every client, maybe just the executor gets it, maybe the trust successor trustee under the revocable trust gets it, maybe the kids are notified, maybe certain kids are notified and not other kids. You can do whatever you want, but nobody can tinker with it. This solves one of the issues that has been common in my practice of fights over tangible property. There's nothing to fight about because it's exactly correct. And there's nothing to fight about. Is it the real list? Is it an outdated list? Did somebody steal the list? You can't have any of that happen. Does that all make sense? Did I explain?
Marty, you just nailed it. I mean, I
Right,
mean,
so you guys
we
are going to
can't
hire me
explain
and Tom, right?
So I actually had another idea, and this goes beyond just the list of tangible assets. And this is more of a personal view that clients can do when it comes to their planning. Many people, if they pass away young, They may want to have their children get letters that they write to them at certain milestone ages. When you turn 18,
Yes.
when you graduate college, when you reach age 30, when you're going to get married, could they upload these letters electronically to this system and then have this trigger person give them this letter at this certain time? That way, it's not like they accidentally go into a very old cabinet and find these letters at the wrong time. This is letting those personal points come out at the time that this person intended them to come out at.
Yes. And that's exactly what we call as milestone-based delivery of asset information. A beneficiary reaching 18 years of age or 21 years of age, or maybe getting married, these are the milestones of their life. And whenever those milestones are achieved, on those conditions, this asset information is going to get delivered to that. Definitely, it is technologically very much possible.
Yes, and we use smart contracts for this so that even we can't change what you have intended using those smart contracts, because that also becomes permanent.
Right.
So-
And just to take it beyond what you two are talking about, this can go beyond just assets. It can go to family values. They can write a letter to their children of, this is how I felt at this age. This is what I want for you. And Marty, you could talk about this because this is you, and I'm not going to steal your thunder on this one. But the passing of values is as important for estate planning as the passing of assets. And this could be another way to help clients pass these values down to their children.
First, one of the things that I've said and I made the phrase up probably close to 40 years ago, early in my practice. Estate planning should not merely be about the transmission of wealth, it should be about the transmission of values. And what Tom just said, I think, is brilliant. And what Deepak and Ishan said they can easily do is fascinating, because the letter of instruction that you give an heir, I'm going to say child, but it could be anybody, at age 18 is going to be different than what you want at age 30. And it may be different what you want to say to them at age 50. And you may want to have letters like that. And I would go a step further. If you really want to transmit wealth, or a client wants to transmit wealth, if you don't transmit education and knowledge and values, guardrails, thoughts about what you do with the wealth and how you accumulate and use the wealth, you're not really going to be passing on that wealth, because it's much more likely for the wealth to be dissipated. There's a famous saying that I can't remember, but it's something like shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So grandpa starts a business, is fabulously successful. The son inherits the business, and then the granddaughter gets what's left of the business, and the granddaughter ends up leaving nothing to pass on to her heirs, because it went from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, meaning they all have to go back to work. But what a fascinating way to integrate, psychology, sociology, the input of everybody to create communications at specified ages. We have to continue this
And the
discussion.
tacit knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the tacit knowledge that one has during their lifetime, right, about the business, which is not documented anywhere, right? That can be passed on from generation to generation.
And it's so important for these letters of instruction. If a trustee is going to be in charge of a trust, that personal heartfelt letter telling them how you feel is critical. And a lot of this kind of information you don't want embodied in a legal document, because what if things change and now you have a constraint that doesn't make sense? But you can put it in the blockchain. It can't get tinkered with. The heir is going to get it when you've designated. So those lessons and values, which may have to be interpreted, you may not want them legally binding, but doesn't mean they're not valuable. I think we're getting to the point where we're going to have to stop for today, because we've covered a lot, and I think we've spent, if I'm right, close to an hour, give or take. I forgot to turn my phone on, so I didn't time it. But just, I'm going to let you guys recap and Tom recap. But I started this by saying this is, I believe, the future of the profession. I know a lot of lawyers are going to bristle and, oh my, it's not there. We're concerned about confidentiality. And I understand that. But Ishan and Deepak have explained how the confidentiality is preserved. But think of the positives. You have a document that is so difficult to tamper with. I'm fascinated by the idea, and I want to do some research on if we can admit a photocopy of a will, why can't we admit something from the blockchain? And maybe you guys will help us do some research on that, because if we can demonstrate that the law and admitting a copy of a will works for blockchain, if it hasn't been done yet, that's really powerful. The idea of the client confidential portals that we and lots of professional estate planning firms use, this seems more secure, can't be tinkered with, and no one can forget about it. So they're really fascinating. And part of what I wanted to do, the next session, we're gonna go through their presentation and explain and demonstrate how some of this can be done. But I wanted to try to present ideas of practical uses that even if a lawyer is uncomfortable saying buying into everything that Deepak and Ishan are going to talk about next time, there still may be some preliminary steps that are fascinating to think about. So why don't Deepak, Ishan, each of you summarize any summary points or comments or last suggestions you want to make, and then I'll give Tom the last word.
Sure. So we firmly believe that succession planning is not only planning now. It has to be based on an infrastructure, and the succession infrastructure should relate to the modern day reality of a person's portfolio, and it should also be much more than just a will template which an estate planner gives to the asset owner, and the asset owner is bound to follow that template and not really express themselves the way they want to, because it is their afterlife that they are planning for. So what we tried to build is an infrastructure which is like a piano. It is for you to create your own melody. You want to play jazz, you play that. You want to play Beethoven, you play that. You want to play Michael Jackson, you play that, because at the end of the day it is your life and it is your family who is going to inherit all what you have endured and all what you have you know you have earned, to pass it on to the next generation. Not only the things that are quantifiable in money, but also, as you rightly pointed out, the family values, those things that a family is known for. So these things should not be lost in just a quandary. It should be preserved till eternity.
And I'll add to that that technology should be used for the easement of the process. I mean, it should make our life easy, right? And there should not be any single point of failure. You should not trust a human or a person. You can trust the technology that is behind it, that it will not be cheated.
Tom, you want to wrap it up and then?
So before I do my final wrap up, I actually have one more question for Deepak and Ishan. We've talked about doing a hash or a fingerprint for documents. Can it also be done for like a video recording to prove that there's been no tampering with that video recording?
Yes. A hash can be done for any file. It can be a Word document, PDF, or even a video.
So in today's day and age where we have deep fakes and AI, which can create videos or things and modulate or copy voices in ways that we cannot imagine. I mean, we're creating holograms of Michael Jackson, to use one of your examples, and it looks and feels just like him. Having this as a way to prove that something that you've created is still yours, this is a very strong aspect and use of technology for verification purposes. And maybe if you want to do a heartfelt recording to family members, your children, or even just future generations, this is a good way to help disseminate that and to prove the validity of it. And I truly feel that technology is going to continue to evolve and at an ever increasing pace. So having ways to help prove the truth of what you wanted is going to become increasingly important as society and technology continues to evolve.
I encourage everybody that attended this webinar to think about all the stuff we've talked about. We're going to definitely do a follow-up with Deepak and Ishan, and we may try to get him for a third one because this is really incredibly fascinating. But just like there's so much resistance in law firms about AI and so many worries, and I'm not discounting any of the worries or the concerns or ethical issues and confidentiality and privilege and everything else. All these issues have to be dealt with. But this, what Ishan and Deepak are depicting and explaining, I really think this is a big part of where the profession, where estate planning is going. And I'm sorry to say it, but if the estate planning attorneys don't get on the train with blockchain, the accountants or wealth advisors or other estate planners may start using these tools to help their clients accomplish some of the goals that we're talking about, and that'll be to the loss and detriment of the attorneys who aren't jumping on board. And I'm not saying jump today, and I'm not saying jump without making sure you've addressed ethical issues and everything else, but this tool, and I don't think we've even scratched the surface of it, and I acknowledge that I feel very ignorant of so much of it, is really fascinating. So I encourage you all to at least start thinking about the topics, and please come back for part two. And if we can get Deepak and Ishan, we'll get him back for part three maybe as well, because I think we'll have more ideas on that. So thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Ishan. I'm sorry we kept you up to, what is it, like 1 a.m. now? But hopefully Tom at least was exciting. I don't know if I was. And thank you everyone for joining. Take care.